The Housing Assistance Council is a national nonprofit that supports affordable housing efforts throughout rural America. Since 1971, HAC has provided below market financing for affordable housing and community development, technical assistance and training, research and information, and policy formulation to enable solutions for rural communities. Adapting to an ever evolving landscape is crucial for organizations within the construction sector. In the Implementing Change and Adopting Alternative Construction Techniques webinar, we address the significance of embracing change and providing practical guidance to help your organization effectively respond to shifts in the industry. Our focus will be on the roles of boards, management, and staff in evaluating and implementing changes that can bring benefits to both your organization and your clientele. Thank you to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Rural Capacity Building Program for sponsoring today's event. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, Lance Barton. Lance is an experienced executive with a strong background in nonprofit management, logistics, strategy, fundraising, public speaking, and agriculture. He is currently serving as the executive director at Staunton, Augusta, Waynesboro Habitat for Humanity since September 2016. He has successfully led the organization for over 6 years, overseeing its operations and strategic initiatives. Prior to his role at Habitat for Humanity, Lance served as the Eastern Regional Director at the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina from June 2015 to August 2016. In this position, he managed 2 food bank branch locations in Eastern Carolina, taking charge of personnel, development, operations, and public relations. Our next speaker today is Retha Patton. She's accumulated over 25 years of community development experience, gaining broad knowledge through experience as a construction project manager, grants program administrator, board member, housing programs director, and executive director of nonprofit affordable housing development organizations. After retirement, Retha has continued to share her experience and knowledge through independent consulting contracting services with numerous housing organizations. Retha has served as the chair and board member of the Tennessee Statewide Affordable Housing Coalition, chair of the Tennessee Caucus for FAHI, and a board member for the National Rural Housing Coalition. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to our speakers today.
Okay, folks. Thanks so much for letting me come down and share. I don't know what that was.
Sorry about that, Lance.
My name is Lance Barton, and it's Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro, and that's how we know you're not from our area, is if you pronounce it Staunton. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be asked to share what we've been working on and how we manage that change. There is another podcast about our failures. It's about 20 hours long, so if anyone's interested, I'll be happy to share that information. Today, I'm going to talk about change. It's super easy. Everyone loves it. I think we can all agree on that. One of the first steps of change is taking a hard look at ourselves. We will use our affiliate as the example. You got to talk about money. It's kind of weird that
Lance, make sure you take control of the presentation if you are advancing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Okay. Are we on the section topics screen?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, folks. It's kind of weird that we live in a country where people are more comfortable talking about sex than money. And today we are going to talk about money. We're going to talk about an experiment that lasted about 2.5 years and what were the results and what was the impact on the organization, and how increasing our capacity brought in new funding streams otherwise not available to us when we were building one house a year, which is what we did for many years. Just so you know who we are a pretty small community, 118,000 in Stanton, Augusta, and Waynesboro. Between 2008, 2020, we built one house a year. We're now averaging 6 to 8 houses a year. Organizationally, we're small. We have an annual budget of about 1.7 million with one construction guy and 2 affiliate staff. Whenever I talk about money, it's very important to take into consideration what is not included in those costs. There are a lot of variables between our different communities, and so we try to take out as much as we can. Land cost varies jurisdiction to jurisdiction, obviously. Land is not expensive for us, but land preparation can be. So land preparation costs, meaning footer-ready land, is not included here. Just this year, we built a $50,000 foundation because we ran into rock. Anything that was donated to the organization is counted as cash, and all historical information is adjusted for inflation. So, like a lot of organizations, we decided we were going to have a capital campaign a few years before I got here. Went to our community foundation and asked for help, and they said no. They said that they didn't think our affiliate was using money as well as we could have. And we were the only affordable housing builder in our community, and basically we weren't even seen as relevant by our community foundation. They were happy to give us $5,000 or $10,000 a year, but we're not willing to make a big investment on an organization that had 7 employees in 2010 to 2017, but still only built one house a year. We had projects that were dragging on for years, and when we did start to take that hard look at ourselves, we found that we were spending 87 cents on the dollar of donation dollars just to keep the affiliate afloat. The remainder was spent on education and construction. Our donors were paying us to have jobs. So we decided, and I cannot urge this enough, one of the most important steps we've ever taken is to stop what we were doing, stop building, stop our education program, and took a hard look at ourselves. And there's an incredible power to stopping. You're going to find out some scary things. We did. You're going to find out you've been doing things that you've been very comfortable with for a long time, and then you're going to be faced with my favorite problem, which is now you know, what are you going to do about it? And change actually becomes a matter of integrity to me, because one of the first things we learned, we are, or were, and still are for the most part, not good at stick building homes. 2000 to 2007, it averaged about 21 months to start and finish a job. We are great at starting multiple houses and really terrible at finishing a single one. That increased in 2008 to 2017, where you'll see we seem to start investing much more in the organization than in our mission. Average build time, 27 months. Now, those of you whose heads are exploding, please take into consideration, we'd still close a house a year, but we had some years where the construction just dragged on for up to 9 years. Because we would just run back and forth. And it's just no way to work. Our highest output in a single year was 3 houses, and it happened twice before I came on board. The organization is currently 30 years old. But let's talk money. At the height of our output, when we were doing 3 houses a year, the average house would cost us about $160,000. Now, some of you are going to say, wow, that's an enormous amount of money to spend to build a house. So I have to give you some background in the coming slides of where we come up with that amount. In 2008 to 2017, that cost per house ballooned up to $350,000 on average per house. So this would not be nearly as funny if we didn't end up coming up with a solution. But I have, in fact, built a $469,000 Habitat 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It doesn't look anything like this. It is a very simple, very basic house. But the thing is that it took us a long time, and time is money. And unfortunately, the cost of time is not something a lot of us are measuring. I am proud to say it was only the second most expensive house in our 30-year history, the most expensive being $762,000, a couple of years before I got here. The power of stopping started for us by saying, okay, how do we find out what we're doing? How do we find out from our shareholders, our donors, the reason why they give us money? Unsurprisingly, 50% of the measured response was emphasized building homes. But I was very happy to find out that about a third of the respondents also emphasized our education program. And then about 17% are built up of people investing also because of the volunteer experience. People have a hands-on part of the mission, and that is dynamite. So here's what we did. Taking that basic equation, simple math, it costs $300,000 a year for us to have an affiliate if we are not building anything. Okay, that is the cost of all of that overhead. So what we did is we started applying it just like a for-profit business, 50% of that cost, $150,000, to be attached to all of the houses that we build in a year. When you're building one house a year, it's not hard to get to $350,000 to build that house. And this is where I'll briefly touch on integrity. I have never been in an organization or in a mission that has more opportunity for conflict of interest. We could buy property adjacent to places we're going to build. There's just, it comes up constantly. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is I like the fact that the organization and how it operates does demand of us to be transparent and to operate with integrity. As we started looking at ourselves, we found out that we were doing a lot of things terribly. And like the old saying, not knowing is bad. But our caveat to it is not doing anything once you know demonstrates a lack of integrity. And that's very true. We have a choice to not take the information because having that information and instilling change into your organization is going to oftentimes draw blood. So we took that information, we decided to make a categorical shift. We went to our board of directors and we asked for permission. We asked for permission to explore different types of building techniques because we had only done volunteer and staff-led projects. We want to expand our education. The board of directors 7 years ago hired me to build more than one house a year. They wanted to build 5 houses a year. So we said our goal is going to be no less than 5 houses a year. Demonstrate good donor or stewardship of our donor funds, and also to use that different metric for tracking progress, which we call overhead. Change should be rooted in a quantifiable reason. I can't emphasize this enough. It seems like a lot of times change happens because there's a shiny new object, or there's a new technology, or just because it seems like a good idea. But in fact, I think what it really needs to be done is proven. Even an attempt when you can't prove what the outcome is going to be able to create very quantifiable milestones. So that different metric, time was our most expensive tool. When you look at the costs of our homes as I demonstrated, it has what's added onto it, overhead. Now, in my experience, when I talk to other executive directors of nonprofits about overhead, most of them are not measuring by the same metric that every single for-profit business in the world has to do. And sometimes there's a great reason. For instance, we have a homeowner education program, or we have volunteer engagement. And the truth is, we're being paid to be inefficient or to offer different opportunities and services that just aren't going to be profitable. So as I explained before, taking that 300,000, the donors say 50% is for construction. The math becomes pretty simple. $236,000 was our average for materials and labor, labor taking up a big chunk of it. You add that overhead and it's not that hard to get to 386,000. The problem is that that makes us the most expensive contractor in our area and have been for about 17 years. We were averaging $322 per square foot, whereas the average contractor was building equivalent houses for $150 to $250. Now, our big first step of change was being able to explore other construction techniques, one of those being modular. Some of you have maybe have heard me talk about modular. We're going to get a little bit into it here, but mainly how the change affected the organization. When we went to our first factory, we had big questions because Habitat International's building standards oftentimes exceed local building code, and they certainly do in our area. So could it be built to those standards was an important question. Will it have curb appeal? Curb appeal is very important to us. There are times when it's perfectly appropriate to have that old school simple house in certain communities, not when you're building across the street from the historic district in downtown Stanton. But I would also venture to say there's also a big move in Habitat to simply improve the curb appeal, no matter what the circumstances in the neighborhood are. And I salute those people because this is somebody's home. This is not somebody's shelter. And oftentimes building strictly with a shelter mentality can hurt the neighborhood appraisals. And is it economically feasible? The answer was astounding. The standard models built by the factories actually exceeded our local building codes, and they met or exceeded all of the 2024 standards for Habitat. The curb appeal, this is something I really want people to think about. We have actually a lot of similarities between nonprofit affordable home building and factories. And that is that we've had to answer for some of the misconceptions of what we do. For instance, it wasn't that many years ago, modular was known as building an ugly house or something that looked like a trailer or something like that. And so they've actually had to work really hard on that curb appeal, just like our organization has, to build a market-ready product. So that was already built into the modular business. And is it economically feasible? You're going to see in the numbers that I show you here that, yes, it is definitely economically feasible. But my favorite story is that first factory visit was with our construction manager. And his exact words on the way home as he was looking at a takeoff of modular houses that we should fire him because he can't beat these prices. I think these pictures demonstrate a curb appeal, a beautiful product, a very strong product. You can have it built in different way, modular hybrid, second floor undone, dry and only. But the reason I put that picture in the bottom left-hand corner is because one question a lot of people ask about is customization. Is it very expensive? And the answer is not in our experience. The stoop that was originally designed on the front of that house, the cost of having it wrap around a little, which now everybody says, oh, that wraparound porch house, added just $600 to the cost of construction. So our experiment was, can we reach our capacity, and how do we measure it according to the stick-built house, which is in the upper right-hand corner? And the answer is we could build 7 homes in the exact same time it took us to stick build a home. I know that there are some organizations out there listening that have fantastic volunteer teams and fantastic oversight and are able to control those prices. But in our instance, that was not one of our strong points. And so we are not going to give up on the volunteer experience by any measure. It's actually increased since we've gone to modular because there's still work to be done on those houses. And The main thing that has gone down since we've gone to factory is our workers' comp insurance, because we now only work on some of the safest parts of building. Data and logic should always drive, which is why I was really pleased when the board said, yeah, go ahead and do investigate other building techniques, let us know how it's going. But they also gave us permission to actually go ahead and buy and do it and try it out. But at the same time, they created a policy that said, whatever you learn, you have to be able to share with other organizations. And so I'm going to put a plug in here right now, which is, this is one that worked, and they don't always. And I'm incredibly proud of my board of directors for saying 10% of all of our personnel costs can be used to share with other organizations freely. So I hope that if anybody has questions or would like to learn more, that at the end of this presentation, they would seek out my information, and I am very happy to talk to anybody. Here's the results. Our most cost-effective stick-built house in 30 years was $181 a square foot. When you added the overhead onto it, it pulled us up to about $213 a square foot. And direct cost average is invoices and labor. Gross cost average is invoices, labor, and the cost of time, that 150,000 divided over however many units we produce in that year. And you can see as we get into factory hybrid, factory capes, and full factory builds, that number just keeps going down to $128 at the end of our experiment. Of course, now the cost of building materials in the last 2 years has gone up very significantly, but we are still keeping our houses under $135 a foot, which makes us one of the least expensive contractors in our area. A flip that we really needed as an organization. 2007, 150, a little bit over 150,000 for average cost of house. 2017, grossly expensive, $350,000 average. 15 years later, we've been able to actually pull the real cost of construction down to what we were spending in 2007. One of the things we learned, folks, is there are some things that we're good at, and there's some things that we're really bad at. And the stuff that we were really bad at didn't necessarily make everybody happy. The 11 people who hired me on the board of directors, there's only 2 of them that still work with the organization, because one of the things about change is that, number one, it's very rare for everybody to make it. Number 2, a lot of times when you start to get into the changes that are going to take place in your organization, it's not a very clear path, and a lot of people's expectations may not be met. It's an enormous amount of work, but it's also an enormous amount of pressure too on the individuals going through this change. The response, and there were a lot more financial benefits to building more and faster. The city would drive down the street and say, wow, all of a sudden there's 6 houses on this block that's been blight for years. But the ones I list here are the ones that are available across the country, either through donor funds or affordable and special needs housing through your state organizations. The affordable and special needs housing is one that I really recommend people reach out to. It can help offset the costs up to 45% of the fair market value. But the thing is we were never allowed to even apply for it, because you had to build 5 to 8 houses in a 2-year period, which we just couldn't do for 25 of the 30 years we've been around. And then I'm happy to report that the Community Foundation did agree last year to help us with the capital campaign. The biggest outcomes as far as personally learning about how change impacted our organization is we started off with what may seem silly and simple, but we actually believed that we did have to change. Not simply that we wanted to build more, or do things differently, but that change was necessary for us to continue the mission that we had been doing for years. We didn't like what we learned, but we are certainly glad that we did. There was a board meeting where people threw books at each other and stormed out with a lot of cussing because they didn't want to believe the data that was very clearly in front of them, and that was one of the tougher times when it came to change. It's hard. Everyone's not going to make it, as I said before, but it really, a lot of times, man, it really comes back down to that integrity issue. Is that I would argue that it can be a matter of integrity just to not want to know. We get very comfortable in what we do, and we get really good at what we do, but what we do isn't necessarily something good all the time. And then that's really all I've got, folks. I want to say that those of you who work in affordable home construction, affordable housing, you're my heroes. This is a flippin' hard job, and it's incredibly stressful. And so it is honestly an honor to be asked to share with my peers, and Godspeed to all of you.
Do you want to take any questions right now, Lance, or do you want to wait till the end?
No, because Aretha's presentation is really cool, and it's about leadership, and it's about integrity, and so no, man, I want to see her thing again.
Okay, that's fine. There was a couple questions that were put up here in the chat, so take a look at them and then we'll answer them at the end.
If it's okay, I'll respond to them in the chat.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. You're on mute, Retha.
Okay, we're going to continue talking about how to make changes in your organization. That was the point of this webinar, is to kind of, you've got an idea. How do you implement it? What roads do you take? What all do you have to do? You got this great idea. How do you do it? So something I loved, this phrase, it says, I would rather be prepared for an opportunity that never comes than to have an opportunity come and I'm not prepared. So you kind of have to be open. I always say my antenna are out, always looking for ideas. To 2010 was really growing. I started there in 2005. Took advantage of every opportunity that we could. We took advantage of every technical assistance we could get our hands on and every training opportunity. And so we went from building like 5 houses in 2005, 19, 27, 30. We ended up building 52 houses in 2010. Our revenue, we were applying for grants. The more successful, the more money people will give you. Just like Lance said, they wouldn't give him any because they weren't producing. This is the effect of that. If you are producing, the money will come. But the thing is like, that involved a lot of change. A lot of things happened in our organization along that way. You don't go from 5 to 52 houses overnight, and you do make a lot of changes in that meantime. One of the things that we looked at, if you'll notice on the homebuyer education, is that in 2010, we actually had 327 people attending homebuyer education. That's a lot of folks interested in a home. But we were only building, and I say only, we were only building 52. So you can see there's a huge gap between what we were building versus the expressed interest. So that caused our painful. Some things, some
Retha,
people,
Retha, you may want to cut off your camera. You're dropping off the feed a few times audio wise. Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Some people will drink the Kool-Aid and some will not. So our change that we wanted to implement was we wanted to become a RD 523 mutual self-help housing group. We had already implemented self-help sweat equity in our programs. We thought we were doing that very successfully. We were using the SHOP funds that requires the homeowners to contribute. So we felt like we had that in place. We felt like we had the capacity to add this program. So that seemed to be a very logical next step for us. We just purchased a 41 lot subdivision. So we had the land available. It was in a rural area. It was USDA 502 eligible. We had a great relationship with our USDA local office. And by the way, that's an example of a house there that's one of the houses we would build there. So everything seemed to be on task. So we started asking ourselves these questions. To whom does it matter? And of course, that's to those 250 homeowners that you were not helping. Why? Because we felt like it was a way to help expand our production and that we could help people learn how to build homes, that they would actually come away with skill sets. We set some SMART goals on how to accomplish that. And we came up with a story to communicate. And one of my best stories that I want to share is that this was very personal to me as well, because I grew up with a dad that was very handyman, did everything himself. And he helped me and my husband build our first house. And he taught us everything we needed to know. And he was not a contractor. He was just the old school that you help everybody. And so having that experience myself made me realize as I met other people that not everybody had a dad like I did. And they didn't have anybody to mentor them through that process. So this program was kind of a way for us as an organization to mentor the people that wanted to build their own home and just didn't have the skill set, didn't have the mentors involved in their lives. So we had a good story to share. We defined what success would look like in that subdivision would be filled with these homeowners that would have completed their homes. But you also have to consider lost opportunities while you're doing that program. What is going to pass your organization by that you may not have the time or the money to go chasing that other opportunity? So what are you maybe missing in the meantime? We also put together a timeline with checkpoints and talked about, when do we, as we define what success looks like, if we're midpoint, what do we look like at that point? And then we come up with some exercises I'm going to kind of walk you through about assumptions and our return on that time and the money and the funds invested. So the first thing we always need to do when you're doing a change is we sit down and develop your strategy. In our case, we were doing the mutual self-help. So we had to look at our partnerships. Who did we need to collaborate with? You can't do this by yourself and you can't make any change by yourself. So I always involve partnerships and collaborations. We made new contacts with vendors and supply companies. We shared this great program and they were excited to give us discounts. And it was just a community. It kind of took a village to put this in place. We looked at what resources we already had and what did we need to have. Because we had been, what you might say, turnkey building these homes up until this point. And so we needed to develop our internal building ability. We looked at our strengths and our skills. What did we possess? What did we need to bring this change in house? More importantly, what gaps were there? And one of the biggest gaps I'm going to share with you a little bit later. But I always remember that everybody's perspectives will change and will differ depending on where you're from. So I remember going into work one day, and this was at another job before I got in the housing world. And when I was building that house with my dad's help, and he went in to work that day, and I was like sore, my elbows, my hands were killing me. And the girl next door next to me said, well, what's wrong? And I said, my shoulder and my arm's killing me. I hammered all week long. We're building our house. And she said, well, I know you're building your house, but doesn't your contractor do that? And I said, no. I said, we're building our house. We are building our house. I said, every nail that's being nailed, I've been hammering that little sucker in. So that's the experience we wanted to give people. So after that, I do a great little exercise called Assumptions of Knowledge. And this is a great exercise. And by the way, I'm going to be giving you these handouts so that you can print them out and use them on your own. They're just a little chart, make them your own. But there's examples for you to follow. So the first one's kind of cute. Just what do you knowledge accept? What is firm knowledge versus do you assume that? Some cute examples are the comment, everyone loves the color pink. Well, do you rate it a 1, which means I don't have a clue if they think it's pink, or you can rate it a 5, which means, yes, I know for sure that everyone loves the color pink. So based on that, with deciding, is it just an assumption that you think, or is it something you know? So based on that, here were our assumptions and our knowledges. The organization has sufficient self-help experience to implement this program. We rated ourselves a 4, which is closer to knowledge because we did feel like we had the experience in-house. Our staff was experienced. The organization has sufficient capacity to implement this change. We also rated ourselves a 4 because we felt like we had the sufficient capacity with something we knew. I showed you those charts. We had the money, the clients, we felt like we had good capacity. The funding is sufficient to support the program. We put that as a 4 because, again, we felt very firmly that with the USDA's 523 funding that it would support the program. And the next thing was staff will love and support this idea. We rated that as a 2, which that was an assumption. We were assuming the staff would love it, but we didn't know that up front. We were hoping they would, but we didn't know. We were assuming they would. The board is committed to this idea. Again, when you pitch it to the board, you don't really know if they are going to go crazy or, like Lance says, start throwing books at each other. So we rated that a 2 because we really didn't know how our board was going to react. There is sufficient applicant demand and interest for the program. We felt like we had the pipeline, but again, we didn't know. We just assumed that the applicant pool would go, oh my gosh, yeah, I would love to spend every weekend and every waking moment on my housework building on it. So that was an assumption as well. And finally, we will increase production by 20%. That was an assumption as well. We didn't know and would not know until we finished it. So I hope that's given you an idea of just things as you're thinking about implementing any kind of a change. These are things you've got to sit down and really think through. Is it something you think you know, or is it something you really do know? And these assumptions and knowledge will affect the success of your project. The second thing we did to implement the change is talk about our constituency. And again, it's that the partners, the collaborations, all those resources. You need to sit down and make out a map. And we just sit down and wrote down a whole list of everybody involved. And would they either shape the project? Like, are they going to be with us planning it and putting together that developmental stages? Or are they going to support the project? They're just going to be cheerleaders and say, yeah, I'll support you. Or are they going to be those that will actually deliver the change, which might be, like they're the ones that's going to build the houses, or they're the ones that's going to have to make that physical change. So again, you can see, like senior staff, we put them in the shape and the support column, but then they really don't deliver, because the delivery people is more the mortgage staff, the construction staff, the support staff. So that's where it really helps to define who are your key players and what role do they have to play in doing this change. You have internal and you have external. So your external components are people in the community. So like your construction lenders, are you using 502? Are they going to support this? Obviously, they do support this program, but maybe it was another lender like at a bank and they don't know what in the world you're talking about. Does the appraisers support it? All kinds of extra people that it takes to bring this program together for us. Codes officials, they're inspecting self-work, they may not be a licensed X out there. So lots of things had to come into play for this to be a successful change. Then the last exercise is like a power of opinion, and that is, do they, who can actually influence? And I guess today's world, influencers are like the key word anymore. So I guess this would be a good example of influencers. So who are going to influence your program? Do they have strong power and strong influence? Does their opinions really matter and will kill the deal? Or do they have low power and their opinions, I won't say they don't matter, but they wouldn't kill the deal? So the difference might be that someone with high power and their opinions would matter would be a board member, for example, whereas a low power might be a service provider, like somebody like at the neighborhood service center. They may not like this idea, but it's not going to kill you. You've tried to bring them on board, but if they don't like it, they're not going to, it's not going to solve your or kill your program. So lots of road changes. You had the vision for the change. Then you had you got the road forks. You got to go left or right. You're making decisions all the time about, is this the right way we should do it? Is that the wrong way we should do it? You have to have a huge dose of motivation, because the road gets curvy implementing a change. The results can be hard at the beginning. You got to kind of stay the course. Some people want to see immediate results, and that may or may not happen, but there's a lot of curves in the road. And then you got to be very innovative, because there's a lot of things you actually have to go around. So if it is someone who's like a barrier that's kind of putting a stick in the mud in your idea, you may need to go around them. Or if it's a funder that doesn't really support this change, then find another funder. You're all the time juggling solutions with that motivation, with your vision and your inspiration. Sometimes you got to take even U-turns. And one of the gaps that we identified is that our construction manager, even though he had been helping us with our sweat equity program, he just, it became apparent that he really just did not believe that homeowners could work on their houses. And he would openly say at staff meetings that the homeowners can't do this, homeowners can't do that, homeowners can't do that. And our homeowners were getting very frustrated, because we had sold them into this, saying you're going to get to work and build your house. And then my phone was ringing off the wall saying, well, you told me I was going to be able to work on my house, and I don't get to do anything but sweep. And so we had to sit down and reevaluate, and we had to bring another person in to run the program. And when we interviewed them, one of my questions that I always ask every applicant at that point was, what do you think a homeowner can do to work on their home? And when he, like our candidate that we ended up hiring said, oh, they can do everything, you're hired, because that's that mindset he had to have. He had to believe that homeowners could do whatever they wanted to do on their house. So there's a lot of tough decisions to make that change happen. So we did finish the mission. We served, we built 10 homes. We had 2 groups of 5 and 5. They finished their homes. The homes are beautiful. This subdivision has a lot of beautiful homes in it now. But we did have a lot of reflections, and I wanted to share with that because not everything's a bed of roses. So you have to learn when you're implementing your change, learn to fail fast. You want to figure it out fast, folks. You don't want to take 5 years to figure out this was a bad idea or we've wasted a lot of money. Put those checkpoints in place early so you can learn to fail fast, catch your failures. And I don't want to really call them failures, but find out what's going wrong fast and found out cheaply. So, don't invest $1 million up front. Do pilots to see how it's going to work out. I loved how Lance's group built the 7 houses all in that same place and used them as a gauge against each other, because that's the best way to figure out if your change is going to be the effectiveness that you thought it would be. But I love this saying as well. It's better to have tried and failed than to have never tried at all. They say Thomas Edison figured out 99 ways to not make the electric light bulb, but he finally did it. And I also learned that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that was, like I said, the example of my construction manager. He understood the program, but he just didn't believe that homeowners could work on it. And so, and not every homeowner wanted to work on their house. I thought this was a great opportunity for them, but, a lot of people just say, I don't have time to do that. I don't have time. So we were still building houses the regular way for them. So we had both programs going on at the same time. We had the 502 program, the 523 program, as well as just regular constructed homes with a contractor. But never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that has. So it takes groups like all of us, it's on this webinar, to think of things that we can change and what do we need to do, because I do feel very passionately that we should always be looking for ways to change and do what we do better, maybe more efficiently. We've learned to live through the COVID with so many cost increases. House prices are off the wall, and we've all got to implement changes to figure out how we can still produce the level of housing we need to produce at a price point that we can serve the needs of our community. So that's kind of like my comments that I'm sharing. So we'll open it up for questions. Whoops. Lance, do you want to talk about some of the questions that you answered?
Yeah, I'm 55, so I'm technologically challenged, but somebody asked a really great question about appraisals. What's important to understand is, at least when I talk about modular, and most people, when they're talking about modular, are not talking about manufactured homes, which are built to different specs. The modular that we use and what is usually referred to as modular is built at or exceeding stick-built on-site specs. So they are appraised the exact same way. In fact, we did an exhibit and art show in 5 of our houses when they were completed, so that people could see the guts of the house, because it's a common misconception, is that they are built like trailers or manufactured houses. No disrespect to those serious solutions to affordable housing, but a very different product.
And I do feel like to address your change, which was changing from stick built to using factory built housing. It's that stigma that just comes with those words of manufactured housing, factory built housing, and it's something that we as an industry have got to get over ourselves. You know, that it like you were saying, you proved that it is built to better standards. So why are we still debating whether or not it's good products or not? You know, it just kind of amazes me sometimes that we as an industry in the nonprofit world especially are still somewhat debating and on the fence about embracing that concept, because I, like Lance, we did one of my other successful stories is that we actually started placing manufactured housing, and it was great for us, and you could put a family in a home in 2 months, and it was fast, and you know, there's people who need housing right away, if no more than that reason. You know, like Lance said, it was taking him 17 months. It was taking my organization about 6, because some people don't even have 6 months to wait. And so we found that we could serve more people faster by using manufactured housing. And it was great. And it was a very good experience for us.
I was just gonna, so we did get a question come in on the chat. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it said, how much more did that cost versus a traditional build?
Oh, it's not more expensive. It's at least the same or less. What do you think, Lance?
So yeah, that was one of the things we thought we were going to run into is having a ready-made product was going to be more expensive, and we were surprised to find out it was the exact opposite. We have compared in the presentation. I talked about overhead and labor and breaking it down into the different expense categories. And it's just no matter what, it seems that modular has come in less expensive. Now, even though it's modular is what I'm talking about, I cannot compete with a very good stick building team, but that is something that we do not have in our community that's able to work at the capacity that we want. So as we start to work on this next development of townhouses, you're going to see modular built next to contractors, built next to volunteers, because they can be competitive. But again, when we started factoring in the cost of time, we ended up paying about 37% less than our stick-built history.
Yeah.
Not everybody's stick-built history, just ours.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's everyone's, because again, if I'm paying a staff, and let's say a construction department staff of 3 to build a stick built home, and you're paying salary, that house has to absorb 6 months of salary for those 3 people, versus a 2-month build, you're only absorbing 2 months of salary. So it is cheaper. And the savings is huge in time and money, like you say. That's where the big savings are. But something else, and I don't know if you found this, Lance, but we were, for the same price of a house, and my prices are older because we did this back in like 2014-ish. The house, we were paying about the same price when it's all said and done, price wise, to build a house, pay the contractor versus paying, we were buying from Clayton, for example. So to buy the house versus stick built, it was about the same price, but we were building a 1,100 square foot home without a lot of, or no ups, you know, whereas this unit, the unit from Clayton, was coming to us at like 1,600 square feet, had crown molding, recessed lighting, beautiful Koran countertops, sunken tubs, things that we didn't put in our houses. So the value to the consumer was huge, huge.
And you know what? I like the fact that manufactured housing is being discussed. It's taboo in the habitat world, and some of the affiliates are starting to use it, and I applaud them. Our particular organization does feel the end product needs to be a home, but would certainly consider manufactured as a transition, and could actually be an important part of the homeowner education component by making it actual and real for people to experience, not simply have to listen to us talk and then, or working on it on their own house.
Someone asked a question about were there any modular home builders in Texas? I would bet my bottom dollar that there's probably several.
So this is, yeah, this is Sophia, and she's asking me this question through email too. And so I'm on vacation, but I'm still at the end of the day doing a little research on home builders in Texas, so I should have some information for you. But yeah, she's right. I guarantee you there's going to be home builders in the area and in Texas, because doesn't Texas just have everything?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay.
And there are actually sites like Texas Manufactured Housing Association, for example.
Yeah.
That all of them would probably be listed on a website. Every site every state that I've ever gone to has a similar organization like that. Like South Carolina had one that had, I think there's like 20 builders in South Carolina.
Yeah. Luke Patton says there are several in Texas, which is dynamite. Sounds like Luke's on it, and I'd love to hear about them. If not, send the information directly to Sophia.
And we didn't really mean this to turn into a manufactured housing the webinar, but it just was interesting that Lance's example about a habitat affiliate making that change is just huge. Just a perfect example of change.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When modular is a hot topic right now, and so it sometimes dominates the conversation. But you're absolutely right. This is about change.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, we're at the hour. You guys did that perfect. You filled that hour great. If you have any more questions, feel free. We have, after the webinar, we will provide information on how to contact Lance and Retha, because they both can provide a wealth of information to you on implementing change, as well as the topics of the modular housing and the self-help housing that they talked about. So thank you to everybody for attending today. We appreciate you participating in HAC's webinar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.